Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to ask if we're ready for the many times delayed post-Brexit import controls at our borders. According to those who will have to negotiate them, no, we're not. But we're going ahead with them anyway, and it's also, as I've mentioned in the past, another indicator of a spring election, no matter what Sunak said yesterday. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, despite much of the public thinking Brexit's done, because all it ever meant to them was leaving the EU, the Brexit which the Tories embarked on is very far from done. Leaving the single market and customs union was pretty much the most disruptive thing our government could do to us, short of declaring war on the United States. When we left 3 years ago, customs and standards barriers were immediately raised against us on the EU side. They had spent years preparing. It meant British exporters had to face mountains of paperwork, delays and unreliability when sending goods abroad. Most businesses just weren't ready. Quite a lot didn't even know what was going on. And most still cannot cope 3 years later. But we didn't apply the reciprocal arrangements the other way. We basically allowed EU businesses to export to Britain easy as you like. It took a full year to apply customs controls on EU imports into Britain, and even then, we didn't carry out many checks, and we still don't. This has led to an increase in fairly blatant smuggling. I've discussed before how we've had a few news stories of the authorities catching smugglers in the last couple of years with record hauls. So many stories of record hauls. And the reason they're record hauls is because smugglers have it easy. They don't even need to hide their contraband in the lorries, so they just pile it up and send it across. So on the rare occasions a lorry is checked that has illicit goods, those goods are easy to find and it gets in the papers. But they're almost never checked, and the smugglers know it. The government have no plans that I am aware of to improve this situation either, and it's costing a fortune in lost tax revenues. But we do, in theory, have customs controls now. Honest exporters from the EU have to deal with that customs paperwork, which has helped drive some of our inflation, of course, but we've never applied standards controls. Every week we have unfit for consumption food products coming into Britain. We know this because every now and then the authorities have a check just to see how bad the situation is, and it's always very bad. But this year we're going to start with those checks. Just like with customs controls, we're not actually going to apply them properly. So even when fully implemented, we will still be giving EU businesses a competitive advantage because it will be easier for them to export to us than it is for us to export to them. So any business, let's say a British business that wants to trade in the British and EU markets, it will actually make more sense for them to be based in the EU, where they will have free access to the large European market, but they'll also have easier access to the British market than they would the EU market from the other way around. So it still drives investment away from Britain. And it weakens not only our trade borders, but our bargain in hand in future negotiations as well. It's why Labour are going to need to twin trade negotiations with something where we've got a stronger hand like security issues. I think they have actually suggested they would try and do that. But what will happen when the standards controls finally come in? Well, the fact they've been delayed so many times gives you a clue. The reason they've been delayed so often, and the government actually admitted this last year, is primarily because they know it's going to create shortages and drive up prices. You may think it's taken this long because we didn't prepare ahead of Brexit, and it takes years to get these things in place. That is true to an extent, but it doesn't explain the delays. The delays mean that the government planned to introduce these controls and then got wet feet. I mean, it was unthinkable to apply these controls at a time when inflation was on the rise, because this would have just stoked it further. So they had to apply them as inflation was falling because it is an inflationary measure. The government said so last year. The standards controls we're going to implement, as I say, are much weaker than we should be applying, but they are better than nothing. The problem is that we're not ready for our even weaker controls. The controls are coming in 3 phases. The first is at the end of this month, where certification is going to be needed, but nothing's going to be checked. I have a hint that the government's probably going to apply a very light touch on this one. I imagine it's a sort of trial run. Get used to doing the certificates, but no one's going to check them. Then in spring, end of April-ish, goods requiring those certificates are going to be checked. Now, eventually the plan is for high-risk goods to get checked, medium-risk goods to maybe get checked, bit of a random thing there, and low-risk goods just to be waved through. So the government have basically said that certain goods won't be checked at all. But the low-risk stuff, nothing's been done with that until autumn. But Dutch flour sellers are currently urging the UK government to delay the implementation of the first two phases because the systems aren't ready. They are worried about the fact that these systems are coming online during a peak season for them, Valentine's Day and Easter. And phase two may well be the one that has the most potential to go wrong. Like phase two is checks on high and medium risk goods. Well, we don't have the room. We don't have the capacity to carry out those checks at our trade borders. So it has to involve some inland checks. It's a brand new system that the government only published 4 months ago. Now consider, when a market introduces major changes to their trading rules, there tends to be an implementation period to let businesses prepare, usually 2 or 3 years. Here, the government have published some plans at the end of August and said, right, this is going into operation in 5 months. Get reading. It's obvious that people aren't going to be ready for this. You know, this week it may be Dutch flour sellers who are concerned because of the high level of trade they normally enjoy at the time when these systems will be coming online and then presumably collapsing, because new systems often collapse when they first come online. Another problem highlighted is that small businesses in the EU won't even know what's going on. This will come as no surprise. We already saw it in 2021, when small British businesses suddenly found these trade barriers in their way. Remember, small British business could be like one person trading. They'd had years of the Tories and other associated Brexiteers telling them, oh, nothing's going to change with trade. We've got this deal, you see. We've got this deal. We're going to have all the advantages of the old deal and we could do our own trade policy. Nothing's going to change. All going to work the same. So the day we left the single market and then these small business owners are going, what do you mean I can't export it to France? What paperwork? What are you on about? Came as a bit of a shock. And it's not like the paperwork, even when you find it, is easy to complete. And we're going to see the same in reverse now. Only, in some ways, it could be worse. Like, for example, small business owners in the EU think Brexit was done years ago. You would, wouldn't you? They might more reasonably think it's stabilised now. And in 2021, British businesses had plenty of notice of how the systems would operate if they bothered to research that this was happening instead of just listening to our government, from the EU side of things anyway. Like I say, the UK government only published its plans 4 months ago. Privately, I'm told that logistics companies aren't entirely sure how they need to manage the situation. I mean, in terms of the timing, let me just point out what's going to happen. So in spring, phase two, over spring and summer, we're going to see the impact of this unfamiliar system being rolled out. The IT systems may fail from time to time. Logistics and exporters aren't currently aware of how they're going to need to deal with the finer details. Because although the government have published their plans, first of all, not enough time to fully get on top of them, but also it doesn't contain details of where exactly checks are going to take place. Now, that's quite important for logistics. By late August, trade will naturally increase as businesses get ready for the high trade volumes coming in autumn as we build up to Christmas. Actually, the only saving grace here is if it works like 2023, the economy is still going to be in such a hole that trade won't ramp up that much anyway. In 2023, the trade actually didn't ramp up as much as in previous years, but it is still going to ramp up. It always does. Ahead of that autumn and Christmas period, trade suddenly massively increases. So whatever problems there are with the system will just become amplified at this point from late August onwards. And the way the public will notice those problems will be in shortages and price increases. And Rishi Sunak is trying to pretend that he wants to hold the election in November when the trade problems will be at their peak. He doesn't want to hold it in May just as phase two comes online before the problems start and leave the mess for Labour to deal with. All right then. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.